Hi everybody. For all of you watching, there's a project file posted in the YouTube video. It's a Google Drive link to a zipped project file built in Bootstrap. It's just a static HTML and CSS site that we're going to convert to a WordPress site, and we're going to create some custom page templates and parent and child page relationships for it. And we're going to learn a good number of good number of WordPress functions and WordPress specific features in the process. We're probably going to learn quite a bit, and you're probably going to learn a good bit about how PHP works in a more sophisticated way. So if you want to follow along with me, you're going to have to download that zip file, unzip it, obviously, and have the page, with the web page which it contains, ready to go in your text editor. Sorry, just taking a second to get set up. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Once again, download the project file in the YouTube page located here. The description for the YouTube video if you have not already. With that, I have the same new site running in Local by Flywheel that we started with last week. And I have, in my text editor, I have this Bauhaus Bootstrap theme, which is the project file that you should be downloading, and my new site folder, both ready to go. They're both open here on my sidebar. I can access both of them whenever I want. If you have forgotten where to find your new site or whatever your local site is called, you can actually right-click on it and in Local by Flywheel and select Show Folder, and it will take you directly to your local sites folder, which contains your new site. It should be inside your user folder. So in my case, it's under the Evan Winston folder. And drag that into your text editor. Now this Bauhaus theme that we're working with, this is going to be what we're going to convert from a static HTML and CSS page to a WordPress page. It's completely fake. It's fictional business. It's a page created a while back for a Magic Hours specifically on Bootstrap, which means we can do whatever the hell we want with it. So it has quite a bit of code already, but the majority of the code that it has is dependent on Bootstrap, both bootstrap.css and bootstrap.js. So we're going to enqueue Bootstrap, both versions, into our WordPress page. We're going to copy over these styles. These are all Font Awesome icons. We're also going to need to enqueue Font Awesome, and we're going to need to enqueue certain Google fonts. Okay. Anyway, this is what it looks like. This is what to expect. Because it is Bootstrap, it is also already responsive. So we don't need to worry about that. And this is not going to be a Magic Hours focused on CSS almost at all. So a lot of the CSS is written for you, or has been written for you, or will be written for you. So if you have questions about that, now is not the time to ask them, unfortunately. I would encourage you to take your own time to explore it a little more in depth. But I'm just trying to make this particular session as smooth as possible. Okay, so that is the static site which we'll be converting. And now I'm going to open up New Site, App, Public, and we have all of our, well, here in WP Content, Themes, My Theme, and here we have all of my personal theme files. Okay, so 2 projects on my sidebar. First, I'm going to jump to functions, functions.php, and this is where we left off from last week. We enqueued my main styles, which is our custom name given to style.css, our theme's primary style sheet, and this get style sheet URI custom function pulls specifically the style.css page contained in our theme folder. And WP-enqueue style actually links it into our dynamically generated head element. So this is the correct best practice way to enqueue a style sheet to WordPress, to a WordPress page. But this is a style sheet which we actually have in our project folder, and it's our custom style sheet. What do we do when we want to enqueue an external style sheet like Font Awesome or Google Fonts? Any kind of style sheet which we rely on pretty regularly. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to repeat this WP enqueue. I always have to remind myself. Enqueue style. And we'll start with our custom Google fonts. Remember, this enqueue style, or later what you'll see enqueue script, takes two arguments. The first one is a name which you make up. You make it up. So custom Google fonts is a name I have chosen to represent the custom Google fonts I have in this Bauhaus theme. That's argument one. Argument two is going to be the CDN, essentially. So if you're familiar with Google Fonts, which I really, really hope you are, you definitely should be, you should understand that we typically incorporate Google Fonts into our pages using a link tag with an href URL pulled directly from the Google Fonts page. This is just a CDN. So you want to copy not quite all of this. What I want to do is drop my cursor right in between the semicolon and the first forward slash. Grab the rest of the URL, copy it, jump into functions, and in quotation marks, paste it right there as my second argument. And there I have enqueued my Google fonts: Josephine Slab, Lobster, and Railway. Okay, now we also need Font Awesome, so let's go ahead and do that. WP enqueue style. Notice that I'm following the same order that I would in my head element in a static site. My main style sheet is always going to be at the bottom. I always want it to be able to override anything above it. So, yeah. And this is going to be Font Awesome, so I'm going to refer to it as Font Awesome. And the second argument is going to be the same thing, that CDN. So here's my Font Awesome CDN in my Bootstrap theme. I'm going to copy from the forward slashes all the way to the end of that URL in the href. And that's going to be my second argument. So there I have enqueued my Font Awesome. I'm going to talk about how to enqueue a script for your custom JavaScript page, but not just yet. Actually, no, I will, because we're going to need Bootstrap right away. So let's just go ahead and do that. So I'm going to actually separate, give myself an extra line here, and apart from my WP enqueue style functions, I'm going to add a WP enqueue script function. And I'm going to call this Bootstrap JS. And if I wanted to, I could use the Bootstrap CDN here. That's totally fine. But Bootstrap actually requires 3 scripts if you're using the CDNs, so I thought we would just save ourselves some time and excuse me, just, you know what, I will actually use the CDN. Why not? We're here. That's what we're learning about. What I was suggesting is we would actually drop it into our theme folder and use a relative file path rather than a CDN. But let's do it. Get bootstrap.com. Get started. I'm going to start with the JavaScript, and I'll come back for the CSS. Okay, and first we have jQuery Slim. So I'm actually going to rename this jQuery. We're going to have to write 3 onQScript functions: jQuery Slim, CDN link, and then after the CDN link, this is where it gets a little bit different because it's a script. After the CDN link, there are 3 arguments that it takes. 3 additional arguments. So the first is, does this have any dependencies? For which you're usually going to write null, certainly at this stage. Second argument is going to be a version number. I'm just going to write 1.0. Can change that later if I want. And the third argument is more important. The third argument will either be true or false, and this is going to determine whether this script is loaded in your head or just before your closing body tag. Now, because we always want these scripts to load before a closing body tag, I'm going to write true. If I wanted it to load in the head, I would write false. There are situations where you may want that, but nothing you need to worry about right now. So that's jQuery Slim. I'm going to copy this 2 times over. Just finish out these scripts real fast. We need Popper for Bootstrap 4. Popper.js. And then we need Bootstrap.js. Okay, and finally Bootstrap CSS. Excuse me. So I'm going to load that just before my main custom style sheet. WP onQ style Bootstrap CSS CDN. Okay, all looks good. Now, the only other thing we might want to enqueue at this point in time is our custom JavaScript sheet. It doesn't have anything in it yet, but we might want to do that. So, the way that we're going to need to do this is, sorry, just a second. We're going to use a custom WordPress function that is actually going to dynamically pull the location of the root folder. So rather than use the usual relative file path that you may be used to seeing, we're going to basically function the same way, but we're going to dynamically target the location of this My Theme root folder, because there may come a time where the relative file path is going to be more dynamic than you have control of. And so you're going to use a WordPress function to instead of searching for your script along a specified file path, to actually dynamically generate that file path. Okay, so to start this, I'm going to right-click on my theme folder. I'm going to select New Folder. I'm going to type in JS. Okay, I'm creating a JS folder inside my theme folder. And inside this JS folder, I'm going to drop, I'm going to create, I'm not going to drop anything. I'm going to create a brand new file, which I'm going to name I'm going to name it, we're going to call it scripts. Well, I'm just going to call it main.js. Let's keep it consistent. Main.js. Okay, main.js inside my JS folder, inside my theme folder. Okay, so now back to functions.php. I'm going to do one more time. WP onQ script. This is going to be main script, or main scripts. It's my name for it. And rather than use a CDN or a completely relative file path, we're going to use a function that looks like this. Get theme file URI. Okay, now get theme file URI actually locates the theme root folder. So no matter what, this is going to return the location of the My Theme folder, the root folder of my theme. So that's a super useful function for us to use. And inside of these parentheses, we're going to tell it to not stop there essentially, but instead, in that root folder, go into the JS folder and find the main.js file. Okay, so that's how that works. It's still a relative file path, but relative to a dynamically generated folder location. Okay, and then with the, I'm going to give it the following three arguments. So null again, 1.0 again, and true, because I still want this to load at the bottom of my page before my closing body tag. And just for organization's sake, moving all of my onQ scripts below my onQ styles, and we're good to go. We should now have all the dependencies, all the styles that we need ready to go, unless I am mistaken. There's animate.css as well. All right, so real fast, my theme. I'm going to actually use the CDN for this one. It's just going to be faster. Animate.css CDN. Okay. Copy the URL. Once more, functions.php. This is actually a style sheet, so WP onQ style, animate CSS, eliminate the HTTPS colon, and we're good to go. That's everything. Okay, so now we can start actually copying over code. All right, so first let's isolate the index.php, which is our main page, the index.php. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all the content inside this have posts section. In fact, I'm just going to get rid of it at all. For the time being, we're going to have a static homepage, index.php. We will talk later about how to make every single bit of it customizable, but for now it's going to be static. Okay, so I've got in my index.php 2 lines of PHP, get header and get footer, which if you recall from last week, will dynamically pull or fetch or query the footer.php file and the header.php file and populate our home page. And now in the middle is where I want to paste all of the static HTML, which we're going to be copying over. All right, so I'm going to come down and I'm going to skip the nav bar for now, which is this whole section. The div with the ID of nav container is our nav bar. I'm going to skip over that because we're going to put that in our header. And I'm going to just drop my cursor there right after it. Scroll all the way down to where the footer begins. Shift click. So I've got all this content selected. I'm going to copy and paste. Okay, so now we have all the static HTML in our index.php, and we are good to go. Now would be a good time to open new site and view it. So if you're using local by Flywheel, you can simply select view site up here. And there's a lot that's not right yet because we haven't copied over our styles. But the content is here, we can see it, we're off to a good start. So let's jump back into the text editor and let's copy over our styles. Back in my Bauhaus theme project folder, I'm going to go to the main.css, and I'm just going to select all inside that main.css file. Select everything. And in my theme folder's style.css, I'm simply going to, below this comment up top, remember this comment in your style.css is essential. This is where WordPress actually pulls the name of your theme from. Below all of that, I'm just going to paste all of those styles and save. Let's refresh. We're still not seeing anything. If you're still not seeing any changes, even though you've added the styles, that is most likely because WordPress actually very aggressively caches. So I'm going to clear my cache real fast, and we'll see if that helps. Okay. There we go. Much better. So I cleared my cache, reloaded my page, and now everything's looking much more like it should. Okay, so just like that, we've actually got the majority of our static HTML and CSS content ready to go. What we're missing are the header and footer pieces. Our header still just says this generic welcome to new site message, which is not what we want. We want that nav bar that we had in the original template. And once again, if anybody has any questions at any point, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Okay, so now that we've got the main bulk of the content and all of our CSS, I'm going to go back into the index.html of my Bauhaus theme project, and now I'm going to select that header element. So it's this div, it's all bootstrap class, that header element, and I'm also going to select the opening div tag for the container fluid, which contains the entire site. I'm going to copy that, and this time I'm going to open my header.php file, and rather than this h1, welcome to new site, I'm going to paste my content directly there. Save, reload, and we have our nav bar. Okay, still needs some work, but now we want to get our footer ready to go. So back to index.html from my theme, jump down to my footer section, and I'm going to select the entire footer element, copy. I'm going to go into footer.php, and in place of this h1, this generic h1, I'm going to paste my content. Save, reload my page, and we have our footer. Okay, so just like that, we've actually converted a static HTML and CSS page to a WordPress site. This is not, however, a good use of WordPress. If you have a client who really just wants you to literally convert the site they have now into WordPress, well, it's the easiest job in the world, and you should absolutely say yes to it. Done. But that is not getting your money's worth out of WordPress. That is not utilizing WordPress and its capabilities in the most efficient and optimal way. But now that we're here, a couple things that we might want to do are start creating templates for generating new content. So last time we discussed, let me jump into the admin dashboard for this page first. Last time we discussed posts and pages and how those are the God damn it. Hold on a second. Okay, 1 second. Oh, God damn. Thank you. All right. Sorry about that, folks, but we're in. So I'm in the dashboard, and last week we talked about all the different pages and posts and how that's where the original content actually comes from. Here's pages, and here's posts. And we discussed how these are powered by specific template files in our theme. So for example, this is a post page, and let's take a look at what is powering this page. We have page.php and single.php. Posts are powered by single.php. So right now, this is looking for a header with a suffix of internal. If I get rid of this argument in this getHeader function, it will pull up the usual header.php file, and rather than this is an internal section, we'll actually see our header here, our normal home page header. I'm going to turn that back on though, because we're going to have a special header unique to our interior pages. And because we have getFooter down here, we're still showing our homepage footer, which is all right. That works for us now. But we want to something you may have noticed about this, or maybe not, is that our tab up here is not really the most legible or the most understandable. newsite.local / another dummy. It's not that special. And in fact, we're going to jump to pages first. I'm going to go ahead and create an about page. called About Us. I'm just going to copy some of this dummy text, paste it in here. Does not need to be italicized. And publish. And then I'm going to open this page using this permalink here. All right, and now this tab up here is still showing the actual URL rather than the title of the page that we're in, and that's something we might want to change. It's not a very professional touch right there. To change that, I'm going to go into functions.php, and below all of this my files function and below my onQscripts action, I'm going to start by adding a new action. So add action. And remember, the way add action works is it takes two arguments. One is the time, or the point in time where you want the following function to run. This is the name of the function, and this is the point in time at which you want it to run. Understanding the possible arguments for this first one really just requires some research. WP onQscripts means something very specific to the WordPress engine, and that's why it specifies when we want all of these scripts and style sheets to be enqueued. In this case, we're going to use after setup theme as our point in time, if you will. And we're going to set up a function called theme underscore features. So this is a function that we're going to need to define. In order to do that, up here, I'm going to write function theme features. And all that's going to go in here is a WordPress function called add theme support with an argument of title tag. You know, all this stuff comes with research and exposure to WordPress. But now that you know add theme support is a function that exists, you can look into it. You can explore that further, do some research, figure out the arguments that it takes and what they enable. Okay. So I added an action which calls for a specific function after setup of theme, which runs the WordPress function add theme support, which enables the title tag theme feature. Sorry if that's confusing, but you're going to see when I reload this page now, the tab up top says About Us - my new site. It looks professional. It has its own title. Remember, the way that we would normally affect a title like this is in a static head tag in the title. You know, this would be Bauhaus Bootstrap theme. This would be the content of your title. But in theory, every page and every post in a WordPress page has its own head. Has its own head element, and so every one of them would have their own title, but we as WordPress developers don't write head elements. We simply use this WP underscore head to dynamically generate all the head content. So by enabling this add theme support title tag feature, it causes whenever a page or post or interior page to be loaded, it causes that title to dynamically generate and populate in the right place such that it shows on the tab and looks nice. Okay? So that's that. Now this is our interior about page. It looks like crap, but we will get there. And let me jump to page.php, which this is the file which actually powers all of our pages. And I'm going to get rid of this superfluous H2 here. This is what we got. It's nothing special at all. But what we might want to do is put some additional content in here. So for example, right now we have get header here, and I'm going to feed this get header function an argument of page so that we can make a special header just for our pages. A special header just for our pages. And to do this, I'm going to copy everything in header.php. I'm going to create a new file in my theme folder and save it as header-page.php. Paste everything. And now we're going to figure out how we can manipulate this. First thing I'm going to do is I don't need this big overarching container. Actually, I do. I'm going to eliminate this fixed top class on this div, which makes that nav bar fixed at the top and sticky. And instead, I'm going to give it a class of BG light, which will give it a light background. And then below the nav bar itself, I'm going to actually insert a header element. And we're going to give this header element a background image. We're going to give it a background image. So for the time being, I'm going to pull an image from the Bauhaus theme. And the image I'm going to pull is this gigantic paper boats.jpg. So what I'm going to do is, here we go, find it in my folder. First, in my theme folder, I'm going to create a new folder called images. And now into that images folder, I'm going to drop this paper boats picture. We're going to use that as a background image for this new header element. All right, that's good to go. So it's paperboats.jpg. I can close this. Now, for the sake of this demo, I'm going to write this as an inline style. The way to do this is background image URL, and style equals. And normally, if you're using a background image like this with CSS, you would give a relative file path yet again. But this is one of those situations where we're going to have to do things a little bit differently as a result of the fact that the root folder will not always be static, and we want to account for any possible changes to the file path for that root folder, which we might not be able to predict. Okay, so the way we're going to do that is with inside this URL, we're going to jump into PHP mode, and we're going to echo a function called get theme file Uri, which is going to take an argument of /images paperboats.jpg. And we're going to jump out of PHP mode. Okay. There we go. Background image. And I'm also just going to give it a background size of cover. background position center, and we're going to give this header a height of 300 pixels. Let's just see where that gets us. Okay, and there we go. We have a nice little header on our interior pages with a unique background image. And this will load on all of our pages, which call this this header page function. They use the getHeader function with the page argument. This is literally looking for a file called header-page.php. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and use that same principle to see if there are any background images in our static home page that we need to change, that we need to account for. So let's go back to our home page. This one's okay. This is okay. This is okay. These are all image elements. That one's okay. That one's okay. Okay, great. We don't actually have any other background images which need to be updated. So far, so good. One thing that we do need to do, however, is all of these links are not really working. Let's change work to About Us for now. And let's update this href to actually lead to our page, our About Us page. Now, if I wanted to, like, I can't reasonably copy this URL, this permalink, and expect that to work once my site goes live. newsite.local is obviously not going to be the domain where this site is hosted, so that's not going to work for us. The way to use a dynamically generated link, which WordPress will automatically populate with the file, the hyperlink reference that needs to be there, is yet another PHP function. So we're going to jump back into PHP mode here, inside the href of this anchor, and I'm going to use a function. I'm going to echo the result of a function that is site URL. Okay, now site URL is going to return the URL of my home page, the URL of my root directory, my index.html, where my page begins. Okay, so this is home. This is home. But inside the parentheses, if I then feed in an argument of /, and let's take a look here, about-us. If you're not sure what the URL, the unique URL for your page is, you can go into the edit page section, and there's a permalink right here, which has about-us bolded. That's the unique URL suffix for this page, this About Us page. So I'm going to write / about-us. And now the About Us link in our nav bar should always direct to the About Us page. And let's use the same principle to make sure that this BH logo in the top left always reverts to the home page. So here in this href, I'm going to once again write the same PHP function, echo site URL, this time with no arguments. And before I forget, I'm going to do this exact same thing to the same logo in header page. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete header page entirely. I'm going to delete header page entirely. And in our page.php, rather than look for an internal header page, header file, I'm going to keep the usual header, and simply the very top, going to paste that header element, which had that background image we liked. That should work for us. Okay, so now let's check About Us once again. Still working, still good. The only difference is in the internal version, this nav bar was actually had a white background and was not fixed. So if I wanted to do that from here, I might need to override some of those styles in my page.php. If I wanted to do that, I could use Inline Styles. Or I could use a PHP if statement, but I'm not going to get into that just yet. We will in a little bit, but not just yet. Okay, so really I just refactored some of my code a bit. And let's test out this About Us nav bar. Here I am on my home page. I'm going to reload. Okay, so now it says About Us up top. If I click on it, it takes me to the About Us page. So far, so good. Let's give this just a little bit more style by here we have all of the content, PHP, the content function, printed in this paragraph, which is fine, but I'm going to just insert a little bit more HTML here to spruce it up a bit. And I'm going to change this H4 to an H2. Okay. All right, that's a little better. Now, what we might want to do is here in our index.php, everywhere that we have an image with a source attribute, we might want to apply the exact same PHP function that we used for the background image here in the header, which is in page.php here. This PHP echo get theme file URL, images, paperboats.jpg. We want to replace every image source with this function in order to dynamically generate those file paths and make sure that our images are always visible. Right now they're all pointing to external links, which is fine, but if this were a true development page, you would absolutely want to replace these sources with a PHP function that would look something like this. Like this. So this might be bh.jpg. Every single one. That is the way to take advantage of WordPress and to write your code with best practices and make sure that your site receives the SEO that it deserves. Okay. So let's talk about parent and children pages right now, because that's something that you might want to get into. For instance, this About Us page might include subsections on different projects that this agency, this fictional agency, has undergone, or case studies of client work that they've performed. So hi Ismail. If your allowed memory size was exhausted, to me that would suggest that the WordPress loop is running infinitely, which should definitely not be happening. So if you want to send me your code, I'll definitely take a closer look at that after the fact. Excuse me. All right, so if we wanted a section a subsection on this page, what we might want to do is first let's publish a couple new pages on some of these case studies. So I'm going to create a new page, and I'm going to call this, client work 1 with the same dummy text. And here under page attributes, you're going to want to select the parent drop down here and select one of your existing pages. Now I want this to be a child page of the About Us page. So I'm going to select About Us as its parent and publish or update. And let's do another one. This is going to be client work 2. With About Us as the parent. Okay, good to go. So now in page.php, we're going to want to add some kind of section that allows us to actually select child pages. So for that, I have this bit of pre-written code called, these are breadcrumbs. This is what they're usually called. Okay, and all it is a div. Ooh, but I need to fix those quotation marks. Is a div which contains a paragraph, an anchor, an icon, font awesome icon, a span, and that's it. Okay, so we'll see what this looks like in just a second, and I'll drop the code into the chat. Otherwise, you can copy what you see. I've included a number of inline styles just to speed things along so we don't spend a whole lot of time on styling. I'm going to reload About Us. And there's our breadcrumbs up top. So it's kind of like an internal navigation bar, right? This is just placeholder text. And back is meant to take us back to the parent page, so back to About Us in this case. Let me go ahead and drop this code into the stream chat. Unless it's too long, I'll drop it in the Magic Hours channel of Slack. Sorry for the fogginess, guys. I'm pretty under the weather today, but gonna try to get through this as well as I can. We'll have opportunity to go through this again when I'm a little clearer headed, but we should also have another 2 to 3, if not even more, sessions on WordPress coming, which all of which will get more complex and get more fun once we actually know how to handle things. But what we have been talking about last week and this week are really, really important fundamentals that you do need to be comfortable with in order to confidently be a WordPress developer. I encourage all of you to try and experiment on your own if you want to get out there and try and take on a project that feels overly ambitious. By all means, do it. You'll learn a lot, but if you actually study some of the things that we're talking about here, you will be just innately more prepared, 100%. All right, so we've added this breadcrumb section to our About Us page, or rather to our page.php. So now every page we create will have this breadcrumbs section. And now we want to replace some of the hard-coded content in here, like this our underscore placeholder, or back even. So inside of our span, let me break it down here. We're going to replace our underscore with a PHP function, which we've already seen before. This is going to be PHP the title. PHP the title. So I'm going to save and reload about us. Okay, so now it says about us in that section which we just changed, which is not really smart. That's not what we want. But if I take a look at client work 2, a child page, it now says client work 2 here. Okay, so that's going to display the title of the current page where we currently are. And next, we're going to need to deal with some post IDs. Now, every page, every post, every web page in WordPress has what's called a post ID. And you can see it when you're editing any one of these pages. Up here in the URL, I see post equals 13. That means the ID of this client work 2 page is 13. Every page, every post has an ID number, and we can use those to our advantage in WordPress. So let's just experiment with that for a second. I'm going to jump into PHP, and I'm going to echo get the ID. Capitalized I, capitalized D. And let's see what displays. Okay, it's very, very small, but right there above About Us, I see the number 9. Okay, so that means the ID number for the About Us page is 9. I just have it echoed right here. But then, let's try echo WP get post parent ID. Lowercase I, lowercase d. I don't like that it's not consistent there, but WP get post parent ID. Okay. First, let's look at client work 2, which is a child page. Uh-oh. Sorry, folks, I have an error. Oh, there's no argument here. That's my fault. First, let's take a look at About Us. Yeah, it's not going to work. Okay, so get post parent ID actually requires an argument, and what we need to feed in here is the ID of the page whose parent ID we're trying to retrieve. So, for example, I know that client work 2 has a post ID of 13, right? So I'm going to put 13 in here. And now it says 9 on client work 2. And 9 is the ID of the parent of post 13. Post 9 is About Us. Post 13 is client work 2. So WP get post parent ID of post 13 gave us post 9, or About Us. But we obviously don't want a hard-coded number in here, so that's where we would actually insert a function inside a function. And now what this is going to do is it is always going to print the parent post ID number of whatever post we are currently in, post or page. Sorry if this is confusing. This is just how WordPress works. So client work 2 still says 9, okay? Which means get the ID, dynamically pulled the ID number of client work 2, and use that as an argument in WP get post parent ID. And all of this gave us ID 9, which is the About Us page. But let's see the About Us page, because this is a page which is a parent. It doesn't have a parent. And what it reads is 0. 0. Okay, so if a page is a parent, let me make it bigger. If a page, too big, page is a parent, or does not have children for whatever reason, then get post parent ID will return 0. Okay, that's going to be really useful to us. If you're not sure why that's going to be really useful to us, well, let me open up my console for just 1 second. I'm going to open my console and we're going to run a little experiment. If 0 console.log 0 returns true. Else console.log 0 returns false. 0 returns false, which means 0 inherently is a very false-y number. It's a falsy number. So we can use this WP get post parent ID of get the ID function combination inside an if condition to determine whether or not the page we are currently visiting or currently seeing on screen has any child pages. And that's going to be essential for styling things. Like, for example, I don't know that I actually want these breadcrumbs visible on the very first page, because these breadcrumbs really just show us where we are. And quickly, let's change this back to let's jump back into PHP, and inside there we're going to write the title of WP get post parent ID get the ID. Let's see if that works. Playing a little fast and loose here. Okay, that didn't quite work. Back to let's see. I think what I need is get the title. No. Too many WordPress functions. Oh, that's not right. All right, I'll come back to that. But if I wanted that to say back to about us or something similar, that's really where I'm trying to take it right now. Anyway, these breadcrumbs are primarily for when you're on an internal page. Like this might be the title of the client case study that we're currently looking at. I don't want it to be visible when we are actually on the About Us page. Oops. So I'm going to use a PHP if statement to make sure that this section of content only displays when we are in a page that has a parent. Okay? And the way we're going to do that is we're going to jump into PHP. Cut this out for now. And inside PHP, we're going to write an if statement. And the condition of that if statement is going to be if WP underscore get post parent ID of get the ID. So that's it. If this returns 0, that means we are on a page which does not have a parent, and therefore this will be false. Therefore this will be false. Okay, so what we really want to do is all this HTML below for this breadcrumb section, we're literally just going to cut and paste inside this if statement. So if this returns as 0, it means we are in a page which does not have a parent. This statement will return false, and this HTML inside here will never render. So I'm going to save, reload. Client work 2 still has the breadcrumbs. About us does not. Perfect. It's exactly how I wanted it. Okay. Excuse me. So we're getting there little by little. Please notice here that I jumped into PHP mode in order to run the if statement, and I jumped back out of it after the opening curly brace of that if statement, after which I wrote my HTML. Then I jumped back into PHP mode just in time to close my if statement with a closing curly brace. Okay, you can jump seamlessly in and out of PHP mode like this. So bear that in mind. Okay. Now, something else that I think we should do is let's revisit the back to part, which I was working on before, because I think we can get that. We're going to go back to, jump back into PHP, echo, get the title of all of this. How many parentheses? 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then jump out of PHP mode. Let's see if that will do it. Perfect. There we go. So now it says client work 2 up top in the breadcrumbs, and back to about us right here. While we're at it, we will need to address the href of this actual anchor very soon. But first, there is something that I'm noticing here. We have written this chunk of code, WP get post parent ID, get the ID, several times. So whenever you see that happening in your code, doesn't matter if you're working on WordPress or vanilla JavaScript or anything else, whenever you see that happening, you should really find a way to refactor it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this whole piece of content, and I'm going to put it inside a PHP variable. And I'm going to call this variable, remember you declare PHP variables with a $sign. There's no var like in JavaScript, just $sign, the parent. And set it equal to exactly this. Now I can simply refer to it using the parent as a variable. I'm going to copy that, and everywhere I have this long-winded double function here, I'm going to simply replace it with my new variable. Okay, so that's 2 places. We're going to be using it more in a little bit, so refactoring is good. Let's make sure it still works. It still works. Everything is good. Okay. Okay. So now that our breadcrumbs are pretty much ready to go, how do we get to these child pages? How do we get to client work 2? And obviously, these can be styled very easily. They can have pictures, they can have a gallery, they can be much longer. But we're just setting up our pathways here. We're setting up the architecture of our site. So how do we get from About Us to Client Work 2? There is no link to the child pages of About Us. So let's do that. Let's do that by inside PHP. I'm sorry, inside page.php. And I'm going to come below the title and the content here. I'm going to add a sidebar. Okay, and this is another small batch of code that I will paste into the Magic Hours channel on Slack, but it's pretty small. It does, however, have some inline styles, again, to speed things along, so I will paste it, and feel free to use it if you are coding along. If you're not coding along with this video concurrently, if you're watching this in the future, I will have these pasted in the video description, so you should find them there under breadcrumbs and sidebar. In fact, let me just label them in a comment right now. Breadcrumbs and sidebar. Okay. I'm going to copy this and paste it into the Slack channel right now. Okay. So now that we've got the sidebar going, let's go ahead and see what that looks like. Load my About Us page. Okay, that's down there. Alright, well that'll work for now. We'll make that look prettier in a bit. Actually, that's what I can do. I can take all of this content and put it in here. That should do it. Okay, I'll live with that for now. We can bring this up and style it a little bit later. But right now, we've got this little sidebar that says About Us and our history and our goals, which are not things that we should be using. Let's change these to Client Work 1 and Client Work 2. These are obviously not going to stay hard-coded, but we want to set ourselves up first, set ourselves up correctly. Okay, Client Work 1, Client Work 2. Now, before we go any further with this, because this is a deceptively complex part of how WordPress works, I want to talk about arrays briefly in PHP. If you recall, let me do this just below the header. If you recall, we were capable of writing arrays in PHP with, like animals equals array, and then in parentheses, cat, dog, pig. Okay, and this is an array of 3 items. But what PHP supports is a unique data type called associative arrays. Associative arrays, and these are hugely important in most PHP, and especially in WordPress. So an associative array is an example. Like, let's say I wanted an array, but I wanted each of these values to behave more like an object in that they have properties. So it's kind of like an array of objects, but it's all one data type. The way this would work in PHP is, I'm going to break these all onto different lines. We have our 3 different animals, and we're going to pair each of these animals up with an additional property. So cat, we're going to use this arrow syntax here, equals and greater than. This is very common in PHP. So just get used to the sight of it, get used to writing it a little bit, get used to understanding how to read it. So cats go meow, dogs go woof, and pigs go oink. Okay, so now we have an array of 3 items. This array only has 3 items, but each one of these items is an animal itself and is paired with a value for the sound that it makes. Meow, woof, and oink. Okay, this is an associative array. An associative array. Let's go ahead and echo this, see what it looks like. Echo animals. And it just says array, so that's not very helpful. But to access individual items in an array in PHP, you can't actually use an index, a numeric operator like you might expect based on JavaScript. You're actually going to just simply call out the name of the item. So I'm going to call out cat, and what we should see printed is meow. There we go. Make it bigger. There it is. Meow. Okay, so that's how associative arrays work, and they're very, very helpful. They're extremely helpful, especially for WordPress when we're doing a lot of complex relationships between pages. So back to the sidebar. I'm actually going to delete all the content of this UL inside our sidebar. And inside the sidebar, I'm going to jump into PHP mode and out of PHP mode. And inside, we're going to write an if statement. And an else statement. Okay, now what we want this to do is we want this to display specifically the children of a given parent. Okay, so we're going to use a couple of different things here. Remember this, the parent variable that we declared up here? Well, this either equals a number, which means this is a post that has a parent, or it equals 0, which means this post or page does not have a parent. So we're going to use that logic down here too by checking if the parent. If the parent is 0, this post or page has no parent, and this will return false. This if statement will not run. If, however, it returns true, that means we are in a child page, and we're going to create a variable called find children of, and this is going to be the parent. Okay, so this is creating a new variable which is going to be equal to the numeric value of the parent post. Otherwise, if the parent is 0, then we know we're in a post that doesn't have parents, so we're just going to do find children of, get the ID. So we're going to find the children of the post we're currently in. Does this make sense? Let me try and explain it a little bit more. Currently we have an About Us page with 2 children. But we could also have a services page with 2 children, or a contact page with 2 children. What we don't want is for all 6 children to display at the same time in this sidebar. When we're in the About Us page, we only want to see the About Us children. Okay? Further, when we're in client work, well, that doesn't work yet. When we're in client work 2, and we also have this sidebar, We only want to see the other About Us children. We don't want to see the children of services, the children of contact, the children of other sections of our page, especially if your page is much bigger or much more dynamic. So, we're going to use this variable, find children of, to indicate the post whose children should display in this sidebar. We haven't defined how yet, but we're going to use this variable, find children of, to define the post whose children will display in this sidebar. So if the parent variable is 0, that means we are in a parent page, and so we substitute the value of the parent page post ID as the ID of the page whose children are going to display in the sidebar. So if we're in About Us, we're going to see the About Us children. If we're in Services, we're going to see the Services children. If we're in Contact, we're going to see the Contact children. Otherwise, we're going to, that's the else. And otherwise, if we're in a child, then we're going to get the parent of that child and use that as the reference for whose children are going to display in the sidebar. Okay, so after our if and else statement, we're going to use a WordPress function called WP list pages, and this is going to take an array an array as an argument, an associative array as an argument, and the items in this array are going to be title underscore li, li for list item, and this is going to have a value of null, and child of, which is going to have a value of find children of. And that should do it. I'll explain exactly what's going on there in a second. Let's make sure it's working first. All right, good. It's still working. Remember, we eliminated all the hard-coded content from this UL. So if this loop was not working, or rather, if this condition and this array was not working, we should no longer see client work 1 and client work 2 down here. All right, so let's put a value into title li here. I'm just going to put pages and see what changes. Okay, so now what happens is, I don't know if you can tell, the font is quite fine, but it now says pages right up here. Okay, so this is effectively the title of this list of children of the find children of variable. I know this seems complicated, but try it on your own. Try deliberately creating child pages of other pages a couple times and seeing how you can manipulate them. If you feel yourself completely disinterested in child-parent page relationships, that's only because you're not thinking about how much of an effect they can have on your page or how helpful they can be for organizing your page. You know, the quintessential WordPress format is like a university page, a page which has a web page which has different sections dependent on major, and each major has subsections based on classes or professors or departments, and each class has subsections based on different teachers teaching it in different semesters, and each teacher has children pages that lead to, you know, their theses or their books or their own personal web pages. We take for granted just how nested very, very common web pages out there become. And the possible relationships that can exist between parent and child pages in WordPress is much more complicated than just a one-way parent-child relationship. a page can be a child of one page and a parent of another and a sibling of another, and it can be other pages can redirect to it which aren't related to it at all, etc., etc., etc. The benefit of grouping pages into child and parent relationships is taking advantage of these WordPress functions like WP list pages and the child of the child of item inside the array that it takes as an argument. These allow us to take very, very precise control over our page. This may not have been the best example, for which I apologize, but do not underestimate the power that this actually gives us in building content for clients, especially once we get into how to make every single line of text and every image and every small bit of your website directly editable by your client. Your client will be able to simply, like Squarespace, click on a paragraph and completely change the content. And the page will selectively refresh to display the new content. All right, so that's our sidebar. I'm going to once again revert this title li to null because we don't need that. We don't want a title there. Okay, now the only problem with this sidebar currently, let me reload so we see it fresh. It shows up on client work 2, which is a child. It shows up on About Us, which is a parent. But if I jump into Pages and open up this sample page, remember this is the page that automatically comes with my theme. If I open up Sample Page, which is neither a parent or child, it also has a sidebar here, which also says About Us, which it should not. Currently, the About Us is coming from here. Let's go ahead and once again echo the title of the parent in this About Us section here. So this is going to be, we're going to need to use another if statement for that. I'll come back to it. More importantly, we want this sidebar to show up on parent pages. We want it to show up on child pages. But what about on an independent page like this sample page? This page has no parent. It has no children. Does it need the sidebar at all? The short answer is no, it definitely doesn't. So if we wanted to make sure that this sidebar does not display on pages which have neither parent nor children, we will once again jump back into PHP. So let me see. Here's the whole sidebar right here. I'm going to just give myself some space. We're going to jump into PHP. Comments, HTML comments behave very weirdly in PHP, so please bear that in mind. We're going to jump into PHP, and we're going to declare a variable called something like test array. And what test array is going to be is a function called get pages, which is going to take an array as an argument, and this is going to be another associative array. It simply fetches the children of, and we're going to use get the ID. which again is the ID of the current post. Okay, so if there are no children, this is going to return null, or 0, or undefined. So below here, we're going to use an if statement to test. If the parent or test array okay, so what this means is if the parent is true, which means it's a child page, or test array is true, which means it's a parent page, then we're going to echo all of the sidebar content. So I'm going to come below it and once again jump back into PHP, close my if statement, jump out of PHP. Otherwise, if neither of these are true, and keep in mind this or works exactly the same as the double bars in JavaScript. Okay, but you can actually write or in PHP. In fact, you have to. So if either of these are true, then we will see this sidebar content. If neither of them are true, then I have an error. Whoops. Child of get the, oh, no semicolon there. There we go. If neither of them are true, the sidebar will not load at all. Okay? So we've actually gone over quite a bit here, quite a bit of additional PHP, quite a bit of WordPress logic, a number of WordPress functions, which I would encourage you all to review. And in fact, let's list them out real fast. In header.php, we went over site URL and the arguments that it takes. For example, site URL with an argument of about us. We went over get permalink. Actually, we didn't get over get permalink. We'll do that now. In our header, well, maybe I shouldn't. Yeah, I think you guys have enough to think about. We have site URL, and honestly, get permalink behaves the exact same way as site URL. WP footer, get header, WP head. Yeah, let's rehash all of these. Okay, so WP head, remember, generates the dynamic content of the head element on every page. WP footer, you guys remember what that does? WP footer actually causes this black taskbar or admin bar up top to load when you are logged in as a WordPress admin. So if you want to be able to customize your site while looking at it, you need to include WP footer in something like your header or footer.php file, so it loads on every page. Okay, and how did we use images? We used get theme file URI. So get theme file URI, which generates the file path or file address of your root theme folder. And you can then, inside of this as an argument, go into your images folder, go into your themes.js folder, your themes CSS folder, and look for a specific file. Okay. We talked about the title, and we talked about get the title. If you're wondering about the difference, the real difference is the title actually echoes the content of the title for you. Get the title simply returns it to memory. Okay, so the title will cause the title to display. Get the title will not. If you wanted to display using get the title, you would need to write echo get the title. It's just a PHP thing. However, many functions in WordPress have similar counterparts. Okay. The content, obviously there's also get the content, as you might imagine. Get pages. Get pages. WP get post parent ID. Let's see, what else did we do? WP list pages. We obviously talked about associative arrays in PHP. And get the ID. Yeah, okay. Get the ID. Think that's it. And of course, we reviewed add action, remember, which takes 2 arguments. WP on Q style, which takes 2 arguments, and WP on Q script, which takes 5 arguments. And both of these are for attaching external CSS and JavaScript pages to your HTML. Okay. Also, of course, as we discussed, get header and get footer. And if you want to fetch a custom header.php file or footer file, you would feed an argument in here like custom. And this would cause this function to look for a header-custom.php. Or if you did the same thing for footer, a footer-custom.php. So this is a very common and easy way to create unique headers or footers for your interior pages or your about page or any kind of special page. Okay, we discussed using get theme file URI to dynamically retrieve file paths, and get site URL with arguments to dynamically generate hyperlink references. Okay, I mentioned get the permalink. Get the permalink, which truly is exactly the same thing, except get the permalink needs to be echoed if you want to display it. All right, I think that about covers most of what we went over today. We have incorporated a static HTML and static CSS page into WordPress, so it's now ready for further customization, either by enabling selective refresh of all this content, which we'll go over next week, or by now turning it into a more dynamic network of pages and posts, which can be updated and added to regularly. So this is the approach that you would take if you were creating a website for a business that regularly generates content, like a blog or new case studies or new opinions or a news aggregator that has editors come in and write guest stories for them. Anything like that. Any site that creates original content, the most efficient and effective and common way for those sites to approach creating and distributing that content is with a content management system like WordPress. WordPress is by far the most popular, and once again, if you intend to freelance, it's the way to go. All right, so I hope this was helpful. I will probably do this session again when I'm a little more all there, so I apologize. Thank you guys for sticking with me, those of you who are here. Yeah, all one of you. and once I have the next session for this nailed down. We will meet again and start exploring some more fun stuff, like creating a much more complex page, much more complex page relationships, and also special pages. Like you might have pages for events, pages for news articles, pages for blog posts, or for the university example, professor pages and class pages and major pages. I don't know. So it will take some thinking as to how we're going to organize our content, but that's what WordPress is for. If this seems boring, it's only because you really do need to understand how to deal with all of this and how the WordPress logic works before you can dive into the more fun stuff. Next week, I will teach you exactly how to make every piece of textual content on the page directly editable by the client, which is really what the clients are paying for. Okay, so that's an important step. And once you have that, and once you wrap your brain around all the other stuff that we talked about last week and this week, you're going to do great. All right, so thanks again for coming, and I'll see you again soon.